Hi, I'm Mike Conlon, your host of the Weiser Books Radio Hour. Today's guest is Theresa Reed, also known as the Tarot Lady, author of Tarot for Troubled Times, Astrology for Real Life, and most recently, Tarot No Questions Asked. Welcome to the show, Theresa.
Hey, Mike, thank you for having me.
Oh, it's so great to have you on the show again. So, Tarot No Questions Asked is the No Questions Asked that's kind of the interesting bit of that. Can you explain that a little bit to listeners and potential readers?
Absolutely. So I like to consider myself kind of an old school tarot reader. There's many modern ways of doing tarot, and some of the modern ways now are to use it as therapy or, to use it as a creative prompt. And divination is sometimes frowned upon, but I like to do readings with very little information and just using my intuition. So basically, no questions asked is about how to do an intuitive tarot reading. When I start out working with people, we all start out I just do a general outlook. I just look at whatever I see. I don't look at the questions. I don't worry about that. I just want to go into whatever I'm feeling, whatever I'm sensing, and then go from there.
Got
So
it.
that's really the basic behind the book. It's about being an intuitive reader.
So what comes first, intuition or the tarot? Because as I was looking through the book, one of the senses I got is that using the book, using tarot, is a way to develop your intuition.
Absolutely. Now, for me, I grew up in a very intuitive household where intuition was always king. It trounced everything. And so intuition came for me before tarot. And but I find for most people, most people when they come to tarot, they come into it because they're curious about the cards, or maybe they want to see if they have any intuitive abilities. And I believe everybody does have intuitive abilities. They just need a way to access that. And I think tarot is a great tool to help people to become more aware of their intuition and to learn to maybe also respect it a little bit more.
Got it. I mean, on my end, one of the things that as I was learning to kind of trust my intuition was you'd get to the other side of something and say, "Oh, huh, that worked out kind of the way I thought it would," or I had a gut feeling that that was going to be the way it was. Um, Using the tarot, how do you key into that? How do you develop that? Not just a sense of using it, but recognizing it for what it is.
Well, I believe everything is a symbol. And again, that comes from growing up in a household like that. Everything is a symbol, everything is a sign. So I'm always looking for signs. I'm always like reading between lines and trying to figure out what do different things mean and what does it mean for me. And tarot is a language of symbols, and the symbols are universal. I mean, everybody knows when you look at, for example, an image of a bunch of coins, we know this has something to do with money. Or if we look at the Two of Cups, we can see two figures coming together. Well, this has something to do with relationships. They're universal. And so it really helps you. You can look at them as a visual aid and you see what the symbols are and how they're going together and what story is unfolding, kind of like a picture book. And your intuition then fills in the details. So that's really how tarot works in a nutshell.
Got it. Now I know that on our end, we see that tarot books are selling, which means that we assume there's a growing interest in tarot, or at least more interest than usual. Do you see the same thing on your end, and would you care to guess why?
Oh, absolutely. And there's a lot of reasons why. But the biggest reason is the internet. Now, I like to say back in the day when I first started working as a professional tarot reader, which is many, many years ago, there weren't a lot of books. There were a few decks that you would have options from, um, but not to the extent that we have now. And finding the information really required persistence, especially if you grew up in a rural area like I did. I mean, there were no occult shops close to me. You had to really want that. It's kind of like when I was looking for my punk rock records when I was 13 in the 70s. I had to special order everything because you couldn't get it where I lived. So tarot was very much the same way. I had to special order or figure things out. I had to like look for the information, which was actually kind of exciting. But nowadays, we've got the internet, and the internet is exposing so many more people around the world to the magic of tarot and intuition and astrology and all these great mystical arts. And it's making it more accessible. So it doesn't matter. You could be on a mountaintop far away, isolated from everybody, but you can go on the internet and you can learn about tarot. You could be in a crowded city, but you don't have to leave your house to go to the occult shop to find a tarot deck. It's all over. So I think the internet has made it very accessible. It's given also tarot readers or anybody who does mystical things an opportunity to educate the public. so it doesn't have the stigma that it had back in the day. I mean, back in the day when I was doing it, I would have people threaten to beat me up. That now it's like nobody's doing that. People are more educated about it, and they see it as a tool that they can use for self-help. So I think that the internet has done a lot to change that. And the other thing I'm going to have to say is millennials and the younger generation. I mean, they have done a lot. Don't get me wrong. People like Mary Greer, Rachel Pollack, and I don't want to like necessarily include myself in that category, but us people who've been around here for a long time, we've paved the way. But these young people are like, they are coming out, they are putting it on the internet, they're putting it on TikTok and all these social media apps, and they're making it hip again. It's no longer like this hippie stuff from the 70s. It's now become very hip and very modern, and they're really putting a cool edge to things too. I love what the young readers are doing. I think they're great.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, uh, you mentioned that when you were growing up and just getting into it, resources were few and far between. There might be the metaphysical shop, 2 towns over or whatever. There might be a mail order, a chance for mail order out of the back of some obscure magazine that you picked up somewhere along the way. Uh, do you think that that helped where you're at right now? I mean, as far as learning this stuff by intuition, applying your intuition to what you were seeing in the cards without kind of all these resources at your fingertip. Was that a help, or do you see it as a almost a hindrance? This just overflow of information for people who are picking it up today.
Oh, I think that there's benefits to both. I mean, back in the day, having to search that hard, you had to really want it. You didn't become a tarot reader because it was like some easy thing where you take an online class and 6 weeks later you're certified and all of a sudden you're a professional. You had to work for it. You had to basically earn your stripes. You had to get down in those tarot trenches and you had to find that information. It was a lot of work. And I look at that now, I'm like, oh my God, I am so grateful for that because it meant that I really had to put my heart and soul into it. I was so interested in gung ho, it became my life's work. It wasn't some passing fancy. And so that's the one thing that's the benefit about how hard it was back then. However, however, on the other side of the coin, I do think it's quite lovely that people again can get the information, that they can build up the knowledge faster, that they don't have to like study for 10 years to get serious about it as a career. But there is something about that really wanting it where you don't take it for granted then. I see sometimes people now, and I'm not pointing fingers at anybody, they'll get into it, it becomes a little hobby. They think right away they're going to go on Etsy and make a lot of money doing it after only studying it for, a couple of months. And they realize this is actually really hard flipping work. This is hard. And they get quickly discouraged and suddenly they're no longer doing it. While, some of us old school people, I mean, Mary Greer and Rachel Pollack are still at it. I'm still at it. We're writing about it. We're teaching it. We're educating it. And we're still learning new things too, because there's always something to learn. So there is something about that hard scrabble way that makes you want it really bad.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like there was a little bit more mystery to it. Again, back in the day. I mean, I know that when I first got with Weiser, there wasn't even an internet. There might have been online chat rooms, but that was about it. So the dark ages and the Weiser catalog was kind of a resource for people to figure out what they should be buying, what they could find out about this kind of stuff. But there was always, on my end, a sense of there's still more out there that I am not quite getting. Is that still there, or is that completely run roughshod over by the internet?
I think the internet kind of rushed over that. I mean, there's still things that you have to hunt and peck for. There
Yeah,
absolutely. But I mean, again, I want to look at, I think about again, and now I really date myself by saying records. I
right,
mean, I remember when I was a kid and I discovered, the Sex Pistols and the Clash, and this was in the 70s. And again, in a rural area, nobody was listening to this.
right.
And I just found it, I stumbled upon it in a magazine, got obsessed. And I would go down to that record store. They didn't have any of this stuff in stock. And I'd say, I want you to order me the Sex Pistols. And I'm like 12, 13 years old. This guy's looking at me like, he's like, are you sure you want this, young lady? I'm like, I want that, and he would order them and he would always shake his head like, what is wrong with this kid? And it's the same. I mean, it's really funny, but the fact that I had to go and read those magazines and I had to scour them and I had to study and decide in my little mind which was going to be the coolest, most forbidden thing I could get my hands on. It's the same with tarot. There's something about that forbidden, the hard to find. I don't know, maybe I like to say maybe it's my moon in Scorpio, but I do like the mystery. And the internet has stripped a lot of the mystery bare, which again, there is a good side to all of it. But boy, there is something about that not knowing, that going into a place where you're not supposed to be going, or at least you think that. There's something about that that's very exciting for me.
Yeah, we just the other weekend we were in the next town over. We found a record shop. Of all things, we found a record shop, and we're going through the bins like you do in a record shop. And we pulled out. My partner pulled out this one record, and it had a tag from this record shop that we used to both go to find those rare, obscure albums back in the '80s. And it
Yep.
almost brought a tear to our eyes because it was just like, oh, those were the days.
Oh yeah. And
Yeah,
I love it too when I stumble onto like vintage tarot books or vintage
right.
astrology books. I've got this one astrology book on basically it's a how to win your man through astrology. It is the most cheesiest, god awful book. I love it. And I had to search to find that thing. It wasn't like, it was again one of those you're digging around and you stumble on it, like, what the heck? Oh my God,
Oh,
this is really
wow.
weird. I
This is
need
gold.
this. Yeah, and I mean, I just really enjoyed that. I enjoyed that part so much, that looking for it, that digging. So, but again, am I sad that the internet exists? No, I'm thrilled it exists because again, we're educating people. There are people now who have access. And also, what's really brilliant about having the internet, it doesn't matter, if you are somebody, again, who's living far away. It doesn't matter if you are in a wheelchair and can't get to a shop. It doesn't matter what your abilities are. Tarot's for everybody. Tarot is for everybody, and the internet's really allowing everybody to access it. Everybody from all income levels. I mean, you can go online and learn for free. You don't have to buy the book. If you are struggling financially, there's a way to learn. There's free reading apps. There are so many things out there now that make it, again, the accessibility, as much as I really miss the mystery and digging around in bins at album stores for records, I do like the fact that now everything is accessible because that really makes it more fair. I
Yeah,
mean, I don't know if
absolutely. I
that's
mean,
the
I
right
don't
word, but
if I want to hear a specific song that I remember from way back, I don't have to search out for that album that I got rid of heartbreakingly got rid of 20 years ago. I can just find the MP3 or MP4 and give it a listen online. Um,
or
so what deck what tarot deck did you start out with? What was your first deck? And what do you use? What do you typically use now for professional readings when you're doing them?
so the first deck I ever got my hands on was the Tarot de Marseilles, which is the hardest darn deck to learn with, of course.
Right.
So the universe was really making me work hard. I mean, but that was the only deck they had in the store, and I picked it up on a whim. I'm like, "Ooh, I saw this in a movie or one of those movies or something." So I grabbed the deck, took it home, and I started playing with it. And it was really hard, but I was really loving it. It got me thinking a lot. And then we went to the bookstore again, and it was rare that we got there because it was in a mall. And so it was, for us, it was about a 45-minute drive. So that wasn't something we did all the time. And of course, I went right over to that bookstore again to see what else I could find. And I saw the Rider Waite Smith deck. And I looked at that and I said, ooh, now this looks like it's a lot prettier. And so I went and bought that deck. And when I came home with that deck and the images, the pips, they're illustrated. Well, I'm a visual person. One of the things that I was studying very hard back in the day when I was in school was cartooning, which of course I didn't become a cartoonist. But yeah, I'm very visual. I'm very much into those images. And so suddenly it's like, well, this is much easier for me to read with because I'm not looking at just a bunch of sticks. Now I'm looking at people fighting with those sticks, or, maybe there's the sticks moving through the air. It gave me clues and I could start seeing them again, kind of like a picture book, the stories unfolding. So the Rider Waite Smith deck was the deck that really spoke to me. And when I work with people, I still use the Rider Waite Smith deck, even though I've got millions of other decks. And even though my favorite deck is the Baroque Bohemian Cats Tarot. I read Always with the Rider-Waite-Smith because it is universal, and I know that people are going to know exactly what card I'm talking about. If I say Five of Wands or Six of Cups, people are going to know the images because they're so, again, universal. So I always use that with clients.
Got it. Got it. Now I know Pamela Coleman Smith, when she was asked by Waite to illustrate the deck, Waite had very detailed descriptions of the major arcana, but pretty much the minor arcana was left up to Smith. Kind of very much an uncredited thing because the deck was forever known as the Rider-Waite and conveniently dropped Smith out of the equation. Um, so, one of the things that I wondered on your end, where you are an intuitive reader, is how much do you lean on the art for interpretation? Does that trigger your intuition? Is it a crutch basically, or is it more of something that helps you out when you're trying to figure out what the cards are trying to tell you?
Well, the cards can become a crutch, absolutely. But for me, the cards are just something, they're there. They can be a visual aid if I'm working with someone in person, which I don't anymore. But I can still describe it to the other person. So it gives them an image to think about when I'm talking. So they don't think I'm just talking out of, my what. They get to see an image and they're like, oh, well, the Five of Cups. Well, we know what that means, or we know what that picture looks like. So oftentimes for me now, it's more for the client. But it is a little bit of a touchstone for me to start, again, putting the stories together. But a lot of my work actually is coming from something else. It's what I feel. And if you try to tell that to people, it sounds really weird. So it's easier to say, well, I'm looking at the cards instead of saying, I'm getting a gut feeling that you're really creepy. You got it's much easier to just say, well, this is looking like you're doing some creepy stuff and the cards are creepy. There's the devil. Yeah, it's much easier than really just blabbing out whatever you feel. That sometimes spooks people when you do things like that. If I
That
spook my husband because I'll answer his questions before he asks the question, and he always freaks out. Says, "Can you wait till I ask the damn question, please?" I mean,
so, so is that a intuition thing or a we've been married for so long thing at that point?
oh, that's an intuition thing. And my mother was intuitive, and I got to tell you, it's so funny. And I'll tell a story. My son hates the story, but it's really funny. My son was at his father's for the weekend. I'd been divorced from their father for a long time, and he was there. And all of a sudden, I was sitting there, and he must have been about 13 or 14. And I looked at my husband. I said, "I think my son tried weed this weekend." And my husband's like, "He's a goody two shoes. He would never do that. Why would you think that? And your ex-husband's so hardcore. No way." And I'm like, "I don't know. I got a feeling." And so I got on the phone with my son, and I said, "So what'd you do this week?" He goes, "Oh, I hung out with dad, saw my friends." I said, "What else did you do?" And he says, "Well, what do you mean by that?" I said, "Did you try weed?" He goes, no, no." And he got off the phone, and he was really weird. And he ended up calling me back, and he was almost in tears. And he said, "Yes, I did it this weekend. How did you know?" And I said, "Listen, I had an instinct. I had this vision of you trying it. Is it mother's intuition? Is it me just feeling out my kid? Or is it me just sitting there all of a sudden having this feeling and thinking, you know what? I think that kid is doing something this weekend." And my son is a very goody two shoes, but I knew something was up.
Right.
That's intuition. You can't really explain that stuff. How do we know that? I don't know.
So here's a weird thing. I'm gonna just get a go. I gotta duck down here for a minute, but so today, right before the interview, I get a package in like I do, and it just there's books coming in and out. I just got a whole package of other books, advanced copies from the printer, just as a part of a process thing. But today, a reprint came in, Tarot for
Mhm.
Yourself by Mary K. Greer. And you had mentioned Mary K. Greer. Another book that we just did recently was a hardcover edition of Rachel Pollack's 78 Degrees of Wisdom. Um, both of these are pretty classic books. Were you familiar with them going way back?
Well, I did not get my hands on those immediately. The first book I ever had, and I got a copy down here somewhere, is Eileen Connolly's Tarot
Oh yeah,
Handbook for the Apprentice.
right,
That
right.
was the book, and I think I had an Eden Gray book. that was all there was, or all that I had access to at that time. I mean, so that was it. For many, many years, that was it. And so I did not get acquainted with Mary Greer and Rachel Pollack until later. I can't remember when, but as soon as I got acquainted with their work, I'm like, well, now this is something else.
Right.
I mean, what I love about Mary Greer is Mary Greer takes things in so many different directions. I think she's very, she's kind of like a tarot mad scientist, you know, she's testing things out. I'm almost like, well, Mary has blown my mind again. And Rachel Pollack, 78 Degrees of Wisdom, I've got copies, and I'm not kidding you, in every room of the house.
Right.
And my husband and I will fight over 78 Degrees of Wisdom. I'm like, give me that book. You don't need that. Because Rachel's knowledge, I mean, is so, Rachel is such a genius. Both Mary and Rachel are geniuses. They're my idols. But when I read Rachel's book, I'm like, I'll read it over and over again all the time. I'm like, there's still so much I don't know about tarot. The book, The 78 Degrees of Wisdom, it is the Bible of tarot. It belongs on everybody's bookshelf. I think Tarot for Yourself was groundbreaking. If you want to really develop a personal relationship with tarot, you need that book too. In fact, you should have every single one of Mary and Rachel's books, because these two luminaries have so much knowledge between the two of them. They're like walking encyclopedias. I'm always humbled by the things I learn from them.
So let me ask you this: does it give you a chance to put on your fangirl hat? How thrilled were you that Rachel Pollack agreed to do a forward for your book?
Well, I almost had a heart attack because I thought, for sure she ain't gonna, you know, I have to laugh because I'm very much my own person. I never try to be anything but me. And Rachel and Mary are such scholars, and I'm more like, you know, tarot for the streets.
Right.
You know, I'm very, you know, I guess modern, whatever you want to say. But I thought, oh my God, they're gonna think, why would I want to do this? But when Rachel agreed, I was like, I was relieved, I was shocked, I was scared. I'm like, what if she reads the book and thinks this sucks? And thankfully, she loved the book and wrote a beautiful intro. So I was very, very fortunate for that.
Yeah, no, I was just reading that before the interview, and it's amazing what she has to say about it. I mean, it gives me stuff to talk to you about. It's you know, it's kind of that good. So on the flip side, you know, here are these tarot luminaries that you looked up to. You've collaborated with Shaheen Miro on a few of his projects, most notably the Uncommon Tarot. I've got a
Yes.
copy kicking around somewhere, but how did that happen? Did he approach you? Were you connected through us? You know, did you actually bring him into the fold here? I mean, how did that work out?
Well, Shaheen Muro, he showed up at one of my book signings. I came down to Ohio, and when I do book signings, I always go to places I think, well, where do I want to go to eat with somebody cool? That's where I do all my book signings. And so I have a friend down in Ohio named Fabeku, and I said, I gotta have dinner with Fabeku, so I've got to go to Cincinnati. Who goes to Cincinnati? I'm going to go to Cincinnati. And so I went down there, and Shaheen Miro showed up, and we had been friends online. And as soon as he walked in, I felt this connection. And I'm very much like that. When I meet somebody, if I feel an instant connection, it's what I say, I know we're going to be friends. I know we're going to be friends for life. I've had that happen. I've had love at first sight in my life, and I've had those kinds of connections. And I knew immediately when I met Shaheen, he felt like family. And so we started talking then offline after the event. We're like, we got to do something together. And so right after the election in 2016, we found our clients were really feeling pretty flipped out about things. So we created a class called Tarot for Troubled Times.
Right.
And at the time, Shaheen was already working with Weiser. And Shaheen said, listen, Catherine Sky Peck is very interested in us turning that class we did into a book. And I said, really? Well, I said, let's make it happen. And so we took the class we did, and we added a bunch of our own other things to it. That's really a class that we taught. That's what that book is. And then that led to me doing Astrology for Real Life and Tarot No Questions Asked. And then the Uncommon Tarot, when Shaheen was putting that deck together, you know, I came in to help write the book, to maybe take some pressure off. And I just love working with Shaheen. Shaheen is one of those people, first of all, I respect him because he's so bright and so creative, and he's so easy to work with. Yeah. I mean, he is just an amazing person to work with. I'm blessed.
No, he's a wonderful person, and we do love working with him. And just brilliant, and
Yeah.
ultimately creative. So that's really great. But he did do a new deck. I know that you are working with the Rider Waite Smith deck on a regular basis professionally. You just professed your love for the Bohemian Cat deck, which is
Oh
wonderful.
my God, I love that deck. Well, I mean, I keep the deck here. This is so ridiculous. And the reason why I love this deck so much is because I love cats.
Oh
And
yeah,
I love cats dressed in Victorian clothes. I don't know what the hell's wrong with me, but my best friend who lives in Portland, we're both obsessed with cats in Victorian clothes. When we see those old Victorian things with cats dressed up, we go bananas. We're more interested in that than a handsome guy. It's like, oh my God, look, there's a cat in a little waistcoat. So the deck is so cute. That's why it's my favorite. I never use this with a client though, because it's pretty ridiculous.
yeah, of
I
course.
always say, oh, well, no, I say, if I'm going to do a reading with this deck, I'm going to tell everyone their future's adorable. So, no, we got to have a serious deck. No, so I don't use that with clients at all, but
Uh,
it's really cute.
so wait a minute, wait a minute. We're on Zoom, so I've got kind of a visual going on there. Is that a tarot caddy you've got over there?
Oh, here's the thing. I've got this little metal thing with all my stuff I, for my astrology, my calendar, all of that. It's a little rolling card. And it's also got my washi tape and yeah,
Oh,
it's
that's
ridiculous.
fantastic.
I
No,
actually have a whole cart with books over there
that's
that
just
are all the
amazing
books
that
that I
you
did.
roll them from one room to the other
Yeah,
and keep your okay. All right. No, I'll go
you
along
never
with it.
know.
Fantastic.
You never know when you might need that Baroque Bohemian Cats tarot.
Exactly. So let me ask you this. Are you familiar with the works of Louis Wayne, where cats are
No.
concerned?
Oh yes, I am. I am. Yes.
Okay, good, good, good.
WAIN.
Yes.
Oh my God, I love those. They're so
I thought it was great.
ridiculous.
Oh my God. So
Yes.
if any listeners are wondering what Louis Wayne is all about, please look him up online. He did just amazing cat drawings, and I mean they started kind of classical and cute. You talk about Victorian cats and waistcoats, that was kind of his gig for a little while, but unfortunately he had mental issues. I think he was schizophrenic, and as his disease progressed, his art just went from kind of the mundane to the bizarre, and it's just amazing watching that progression. Anyway, sorry about that aside. Love Louis Wayne, love cats. Let's see. So you worked with Shaheen, and we did his deck. And I know that when we're considering decks, there's a lot of there's a not controversy, but there's a lot of people who are picky about things like the size of the cards, and specifically something that had me scratching my head was borders or no borders. And I mean, it's amazing where people go for that. And I mean, on one hand, it's great that we live in a time where that is an issue. I mean, what I love seeing online is all the decks that probably will never see print, but people publish these decks online, and they're just fantastic. So
Yes.
it's always good to see. But what what do you look for in a deck when you're kind of scouting around any of the typical tarot websites and you're seeing new decks posted? What are your likes and what are your dislikes when you're looking at stuff like that?
Well, if I'm searching for a deck that I'm going to maybe use for myself or perhaps with a client, the first thing is, does it fit my hands comfortably? I have small hands, and sometimes people make these giant decks. I can't use them. So I want a deck that's a classic size. I don't want it too small because then I have to squint to look at the images. I do have to tell you, one of the things I love about the Uncommon Tarot is those silver edges. I'm a
Oh,
sucker for those gilded edges. Oh my God. As soon as I see that, I'm like, oh my God. So I love the gilded edges. I love beautiful edges. That makes me happy. Good cardstock is essential, but nowadays, I don't work with people in person any longer, so I'm not as picky as I was back in the day when people used to handle my cards. If the deck was made on terrible cardstock, that used to freak me out.
right,
But now I'm not so bent out of shape. But I do like a cardstock that isn't too thick or too thin. It's like Goldilocks. I've
right,
got to be able to move it with my hands, but I don't want it so paper thin that it tears on the first printing. I love beautiful art. I love really rich art. Sometimes I like silly art, like cats and clothes. And also, I do like it when people are also really thinking from the perspective of being inclusive. Nowadays, I mean, even though I use the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, I don't look at the images. I look at it more from a perspective of energy. But I do love that decks of modern people, like the Uncommon Tarot, the Modern Witch Tarot, they're they're inclusive. They're global. They're showing, people of every skin tone and ability, and I just think that's really important because that's missing in a lot of the classic decks.
Got it.
So I prefer decks like that.
And I mean, I guess that's another blessing of the times is that we are getting more and more inclusive with the tarot decks. Um, so the other hat that I wear here when I'm not doing interviews for Weiser Books Radio Hour is the production manager. So uh, I'm the person that actually specifies the paper stock for cards, for books, gilded edges, stuff like that. Usually it's me telling an editor or a designer that no, they can't have that because of the cost. But um, when you get the uncommon tarot in your hands, your thoughts on the paper stock? Because I'm very
Paper
interested.
stock's good.
Yeah,
It's
not too
good.
thick, not
And
too thin. Could be thicker, it
it
could be thinner.
could be maybe a smidge thicker, but I
Okay,
mean, really, it's pretty standard actually.
it is.
But the gilded edges, who cares? It's got those gilded edges. I mean, this sounds really ridiculous. As soon as it's got a gilded edge, I really don't care.
Yeah,
Suddenly it's like, oh my God, this is beautiful. It's
right.
pretty. It feels, what happens when I get a deck like that? It starts to feel like it's a treasure,
Yeah,
that it's important, that it's a deck I want to take care of now. Whereas I'm going to be now, people, if you're listening to me at the Rider-Waite, I can be a lot more hardcore. I can like treat this deck like bam, but I'm going to treasure my Uncommon Tarot because those beautiful silver edges. It stays in its box. It's in a sacred place. When I use it, there's reverence to it because I mean that sounds really ridiculous, but that beautiful silver edge. I mean, and there are a lot of indie people who do the indie decks too. They put those gilded edges on,
yeah,
and that will make me want to buy the deck. And let me
yeah.
tell you something about cost. When people are afraid to talk about cost, like, oh my God, I don't want to spend too much on making this book or this deck. Listen, when I'm spending $100 for an indie deck because it's got silver edges, people don't care. We are going to spend that money if the deck is beautiful, if it's well made, and if it's got those gilded edges.
Absolutely.
Boom! I'm throwing down the $100. I don't care.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we're realizing is that one, we can charge a little bit more for decks than we have in the past as long as the production value is there.
Yeah, if the
So
production value is there, we don't care. Tarot
absolutely.
readers will throw down. I mean, I spent $100 for that. I think like $80 for that Baroque Bohemian Cats tarot,
Sure,
and
sure.
it doesn't even have the gilded edges.
No,
That
no.
tells you how crazy we are.
What was the one there was one back so before going back to the 90s, I worked in the Weiser warehouse, which was really great because I got my hands on everything. And I think one of them actually that just impressed me was that Visconti Sforza deck. And I think I forget if it had gilded edges or metallic colors actually on the cards, but that always impressed me. And then the other one was the Dolly deck, and that definitely did have the gilded edges, and that just I'm so glad that we get to play around with stuff like that now.
Yes, I've got one of the original Dolly decks, and I
Oh
believe
yeah,
I have the one of the original the Visconti decks too,
yeah,
and it is metallic. But
yeah,
my what I loved about the Dolly deck is it came in a velvet box.
right.
Now, see here again, and this is where I'm going to sound like I'm being really super picky, but if it comes in a good keepsake box, that is also going to be a selling point for me. When it comes in a flimsy box that I'm going to toss in the garbage,
Sure.
which a lot of the standard decks do,
Yep.
well then it's not special. But if it comes in a nice, I mean, one of the things, even like when you look at the Uncommon Tarot, because I got my copy right here,
Oh,
it's got that magnetic closure.
right.
You open it up, it's got a little quote inside. I mean, it's got a ribbon, the silver edges. Tarot people really appreciate those little touches.
Great.
Well, at least I think I do. But these boxes also, because back in the day, what do we have? These crummy boxes, and then you had to get a special bag for it. Well, now I can take this, I can travel with it. I know the deck isn't going to get trashed. It's going to last. It becomes a treasure. It's a
Sure.
keepsake now. This is something, if something happens to me, it gets passed down to grandkids, should I have any. And it's in mint condition because you took the time to make a box for it that readers are going to appreciate that. I mean, that's important to readers.
Got it. Got it. That I can't tell you how incredibly useful that feedback is on my end as far as selling better boxes and higher production values. Ah,
Oh yeah, we
Or-
love that. Higher production values are in for tarot readers. And these boxes, the magnetic close, when I see a magnetic close, that's exciting. I mean, look at me. I'm like,
all right,
yeah, it's
all right,
exciting. It's wonderful. It's going to last. It will
sure,
last.
absolutely it will. Kind of an uphill battle for me to get that on it in a deck, but I think that people are turning around. I think that people are figuring out that we can put more money into the production values and see that on the other end. I mean, as crass and monetary as that sounds, it's the reality of publishing. If we aren't making a little bit of money on this stuff, we don't make it. Oh, speaking of which, one of the questions that I had was the first book you did was the tarot coloring book. How did that end up with Sounds True instead of Weiser Books?
Well, Sounds True approached me.
Ah,
And so that was the first book I ever put out there.
yep.
And they had the acquisitions editor attended a class I taught. And she said, have you ever thought about doing a tarot book? I said, well, yeah, I did. But I didn't know how to go about a proposal or anything. And she goes, well, let's talk. And so I said, okay, well then I put together a proposal. She said, this is great, but could you turn this into a coloring book? And I said, well, that's a brilliant idea. And I'll tell you why that's brilliant is because when I'm also a yoga teacher. And when I was studying yoga, one of the things I had the biggest trouble with was the anatomy. I mean, I'm a smart gal, but for some reason my brain wouldn't compute that. And so I got the anatomy coloring book. And so really started studying and coloring those things in, and it helped to click. It helped me to learn the anatomy. Of course, I ended up then getting 100% on the anatomy, which was very important because I like getting straight A's. And so I passed with flying colors because I had that anatomy coloring book. And so I said, oh my God, this is a brilliant idea. Because for people who are not symbolic thinkers, who don't see everything like a sign, well, suddenly, if you're coloring in those images, you're going to start to see the story that's unfolding in the cards. And for old school readers like myself, well, when you're coloring it, you're seeing details you've never noticed before. I mean, I never noticed on the death card, if you look really closely, there is in the background an image of someone praying before a cross. You can't see it until it's blown up and you're coloring it in.
Right.
That was like, wow, wow, whole new interpretation coming from me. So that's how the coloring book came about with Sounds True. They approached me and they liked my proposal, but they're the ones who said, what do you think about a coloring book? I'm like, brilliant, let's do it.
Great, great. Yeah, I remember the anatomy coloring book from high school, and I can see. I know, at the time I thought it was silly, and then I started actually learning anatomy and thought, oh, okay, well that's why they're doing it. And as soon as I saw the coloring book, the tarot coloring book, it was one of those. A lot of us sitting around here in our office going, well, duh, what a
Yeah.
brilliant idea. Yeah. Um,
And
so
the interesting thing too, there are people like myself who are visual learners. I'm
right.
visual learner because I'm actually slightly hearing impaired. I was the little girl in school who always got called down to the teacher's office for regular hearing tests because I have so many issues with my hearing. So I'm a very visual learner. If you're just doing a lecture and you're doing talking, it's like Charlie Brown. Wah, 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 wah. You already lost me. But if I have an activity that I can do, I'm going to get it. And that's why like the anatomy coloring book really appealed to me. And that's why I think the tarot coloring book appeals to so many people.
So in the book, I'm actually not familiar with that book. Are you having people color the cards in the traditional colorways, or are
They
you
can do whatever they
they
want.
can do whatever they want? Okay, great.
Whatever you want. You could be as psychedelic as you want. You can scribble outside the lines. The idea is you're interacting with the cards.
Got it.
And one of the things I do in Tarot No Questions Asked, that's almost like a little bit of a workbook too in its own way. I have exercises, I call them tarot sizes, in Tarot No Questions Asked for every single card in the deck to get people to embody the card, but also to look at the cards very critically. Because otherwise, what happens? Most tarot books, they'll give you the meanings and they'll say, and here's how to do a couple readings. In both these books, my idea is to create something that's experiential. Because again, people are going to learn better, not just from reading a book, but for having exercises to do, whether you're coloring or whether you're doing a tarot size from Tarot No Questions Asked, you're going to start putting it together. It's going to start clicking in. You're going to start understanding, oh my God, well, that's what that means now because I'm embodying it or I'm doing this tarot size. It's helping me to connect dots. So there's a lot of that. I believe that's very important for learning.
So we're talking about learning, and I'm wondering, is the tarot something that, I mean, do you think you had a gift for it, or did you learn it from scratch? And for anybody kind of picking up tarot for the first time, they pick up a deck, maybe they pick up a book first. Either way, do you have to have a special gift to learn it, or is this something that anybody can pretty much pick up?
I think anybody can pick it up. I mean, somebody once called me a tarot savant. They said, you just seem to like click to it really fast. And I'm a very visual person, it just automatically, it's like, of course it makes sense to me because I see everything in symbols anyways. That's how I grew up though. That's when you grow up like with old farm folks who are all into intuition and mysterious stuff, everything is a sign. The doorbell rings, there's a sign. So, I mean, for me, it was just very natural. That didn't mean I didn't have to study. Of course, I had to study. I had to learn, well, what does this card mean for a different person? Let's say both you and I get the death card. It's going to mean something very different for you at this time in your life than it did 10 years ago. And it's going to mean something very different for me. So, one of the things I had to do is I had to find anybody who would let me read for them. That is how I learned. Again, it's by getting those feet right into the tarot trenches. So there is absolutely a lot to learn. But did I have a knack for it? Well, I did have a knack for it pretty early on, but that's only because of the way I grew up. That's it. For somebody who's coming at it, who's really new, who's not real connected with their intuition, tarot will help you. You'll have to study, but you can get it. Anybody can learn how to read tarot. At the very least, you can learn to read it for yourself. You can use it as a tool for your own personal guidance. And then if you want to get hardcore and you want to turn it into a career, well, then you are going to have to study. Like RuPaul says, you better work. It's a lot of work to do it professionally.
Yeah. Now, when did you start reading professionally, and kind of how did that transition occur from reading for friends, reading for yourself, to reading for other people, for clients actually? And what did that feel like? I mean, there must have been that first step where you were putting yourself out there as I'm doing this as a business. How did that go for you?
Well, when I was first learning, again, I read for any old buddy who'd let me. I always call tarot your instant friend maker. You take it anywhere. If you're in a place where it's really awkward to pull out the cards, you got friends, so automatically
Yeah,
everybody
yeah,
wants
yeah.
their cards read.
Sure.
So, that's how I would be reading wherever I could. I mean, I would sometimes pull out a card on a bus for somebody sitting next to me, and it would always amaze them. So it was always a way to connect with people. And I love connecting with people. And I ended up how it turned into a profession. I had been reading like that for many years, and I got a job as a bartender. And I was trying to figure out who I am at that stage in life. And what ended up happening is I was a terrible bartender, so they put me on a terrible shift. And so I brought the tarot cards, and I thought, this will get something to do. And what ended up happening is, of course, it became a very popular day. Suddenly, I developed this big following. I was slinging drinks and reading cards and serving burgers. I mean, it was nuts. And I had so many people saying, "Oh my God, I would love to have more time outside of here. I'd like to have a real reading. I'll pay you for it." And I was making more off tips from those readings than I was from drinks because, again, I was a lousy bartender. And so I started thinking about turning it into a business. And I was talking about it. And then the boss went behind my back and told everybody I was going to be a big failure because nobody would pay for it. And I'm one of those people, as soon as you dare me, oh no, oh hell no. So I quit my job and I was done. And I said, we'll just see what happens. I have these little business cards printed. And the people who said they wanted those readings, they wanted their readings.
Wow.
And they started hiring me for little parties, and I would read at other bars and work for tips. And it all started coming together. It didn't take very long at all before it turned into a career because I'd already established myself at that bar, and that person talked, and this person talked, and this person had a party, and it all came together for me. It was a lot of work, and it was very hard in the beginning, but I think the way to describe it, on one hand, it was kind of scary because I was doing without anything. There was nothing. I mean, no business skill, no internet, not two nickels to rub together in the bank. And so it was tough. It was scary. But on the other hand, I was so mad at that guy. I was so ticked off. And if you get me mad, it doesn't matter then. When I'm angry, that puts me into action. That my fury about this guy saying I was going to be a failure ticked me off enough to keep going. And the funniest thing about him, he kept calling me for about 2 years, asking me to come back and bartend. The lousiest bartender in the world because I was such a big draw with those readings.
Right.
And he ended up going out of business.
Yeah, it's funny. The partner I'm with right now, she's always, don't tell me I can't do anything.
Yeah.
Because at some point a guidance counselor laughed when she said she wanted to be an engineer, and she went out and got an engineering degree, which is fantastic. I don't believe too much in coincidence. So the other book that is right next to me is an advanced copy of Black
Ooh.
Botanical Brews, and here you are talking about bartending, which is just fantastic. Uh, okay, so somebody's new into tarot. We talked about your transition into this as a business, a scary jump, but
Mhm.
one you kind of made, knowing that people were very interested in what you were putting out there. Um, on the other end of things, I'm just somebody off the street who knows this thing called the tarot exists. I just went out and bought my Rider-Waite Smith deck, and I'm sitting there with the cards. I see a bunch of online resources. There's a bunch of books out there. What do I need to do? Do I need to memorize the cards? Do I need to go through a book with it, like yours does, which lists the major arcana, the minor arcana.
Mhm.
What do I need to do to get going with this?
Well, the first thing, congratulations, you bought a deck. Woohoo! Rider-Waite Smith deck, best deck to start with because most modern decks are based on that deck. Once you learn the Rider-Waite Smith deck, you can read any deck. I firmly believe that. And working on learning the traditional meanings will give you a foundation. So I do believe, yes, you should have a book and you should learn those traditional meanings because that is going to help you when you draw a blank. And it is also going to help you to really understand how the tarot is constructed. You should know the basics. There's nothing worse than somebody who kind of studies and thinks they know something or just wings it, and they can't tell you how many cards are in the deck. You should know all the basics. Oh my God, I see that. I saw an interview with somebody, I read this online too, who's an astrologer. And this person's getting paid to do astrology. And they asked her about an ephemeris, and she didn't know what an ephemeris was.
Well,
That's
nowadays,
astrology 101.
right?
I mean, you should know that. And it's the
Sure.
same with tarot. You need to have your foundation so you understand how it's constructed. And once you have the foundation, the understanding of the meanings, then your intuition will fill in all the details. And if you have a teacher, that's even better. If you have somebody that you can learn from, a teacher, a mentor, if you could take a class and practice with other people, you will get better faster. That would be my other piece of advice. So learn the basic meanings, get a good teacher, take a class, work with other people. That's when you really get it.
Got it. Now, I know that on my end, and probably the way that a lot of people progress nowadays is you get interested in something, you immediately get online, you track it down, and on my end, I find forums, and I get
Yeah.
into forums and start looking around there. Is that a You mentioned the importance of teachers and mentors. Is that a
Yes.
valid mentoring teaching experience?
Sure. I mean, forums are a place to learn. Forums are oftentimes there's people who are practicing together, or there's and you can find free ones, or they're discussing things, or they're talking about different decks. That's a perfectly valid thing. You can find online classes, both paid and free, that you can take. You can also see if there's a teacher showing up. I mean, right now we got COVID, but there are teachers who do live classes who have ongoing live classes too. There's places like the Tarot School that are now doing classes on Zoom. Tarot School is a wonderful place for people to learn. So you can find teachers for free and paid all over, and even forums are perfectly fine. What's important is that you find something that is accessible for you and that helps you to connect with other people. Now, there are some people who only want to read for themselves. That's fine too. If that's what you want to do. I mean, hey, Scott Cunningham was all about the solitary witchcraft. You could be a solitary tarot reader too,
Sure.
and you can still practice every day by yourself.
So what's the benefit of maintaining kind of a personal tarot practice, and what's the benefit of the tarot in your life, basically?
it's a tool for guidance. I mean, I still pull a card for the day every single day. And if I got something going on in my life, sometimes I'll hire another reader if I'm being all like bent out of shape about it. And I'd be like, oh my God, you're going to be no good now because you're all invested in the outcome. You know what you want to hear, forget this. But I will pull cards for myself. I was dealing with a situation recently, and this is where I was being my own bad tarot client. I was pulling cards. I'm like, well, the card show everything's going to work out. And I couldn't leave it alone. So every couple of days, I'd be pulling those cards again. And they all showed everything was going to work out. But I was so anxious about this dumb situation. I finally had to go and hire somebody else who told me the same thing. And, it's like, I'm like, why are you doing this? You know that you hate it when people do that. Knock it off. And then I left it alone and everything worked out. But
So
I
let
still
me,
will toss cards for myself.
that's great. Have you been wrong?
Have I been wrong?
Yes.
Well, of course, everyone's going to be wrong at some times. And you know what I'm wrong? Here's the time when I'm wrong. I'm always wrong when I'm bent out of shape about something.
Got it.
Like if I'm reading it because, oh my God, I really want it to be a certain way, or oh my God, I'm really paranoid it's going to be a certain way, I'm going to start reading other crap into it and then forget it. It's like, put the cards away, Theresa, leave it alone, go to a pro, go to someone who doesn't care about the outcome, who's going to give you the truth.
Right.
So yes, I could be wrong when I'm bent out of shape.
Got it. Got it. So I mean, so one of the things that's always plagued me is a sense that if I'm doing something like the tarot or taking, some stupid personality test, the way that I want to see myself is what I'm going to try to make manifest in there. How do you get out of that trap while reading the tarot?
Well, when you're reading it, I mean, this is going to sound like the coldest thing you've ever heard. You just got to like not be concerned with the outcome at all. You have to not be concerned. And when you are coming from that perspective, you are going to be completely objective. And when I read for clients, I'm only concerned that I'm going to be helping them. I'm not concerned if the cards are going to be happy, happy, joy, joy, or if they're going to show all kinds of negative stuff. My concern is let's come in here, let's look for the truth, and let's find a way to deal with your situation. So I come at it very much, I like to say like dragnet, just the facts, ma'am. And when you approach it with yourself or with other people, you don't have anything coloring it. You have got to be able to detach from your emotions. And again, how do you detach from your emotions and be intuitive and sensitive at the same time? I don't know how to really explain that.
Right.
It's just a matter, it's a mindset.
Got it.
And I'm very good at detaching my emotions, except every once in a while when I'm reading for myself and I'm really invested in that outcome. But when I'm but when I'm reading for a client, it's always like just the facts. And if you approach it like that, or even if you read for yourself, read it like you're reading for a client, like you've never met them before, and you're not concerned with the outcome. And that's when you're going to get the best reading. You have
Got it.
to not be concerned with the outcome.
So, I like that dragnet, just the facts, ma'am, type of thing. In your book, what catches me when you say that is in your book you say stuff like, the question matters. The
Mhm.
question shouldn't be, should I break up with my partner? It should be, what would my life look like without my partner?
Yep.
That that seems on my end, that seems to be getting away from like a concrete yes or no answer into a very much broader situation. So why go that direction with a question instead of that kind of black and white answer?
Well, first of all, life is a series of choices, and we always want to look and understand what choices led us up to here, and what choices can we make, and how is that going to impact our future? Because I do believe your choices are going to impact everything right now. So, for example, if I right now finish this interview with you and eat a ham sandwich, I'm probably going to feel pretty good and relaxed, and that's going to be great. But if I decide to pound 3 beers, I'm going to be feeling pretty lousy. So
Right.
I have some choices to make. What am I going to do? We have to really become aware of our choices, and tarot can help you with that. And if you just say, will I get married? Well, I mean, you're just trying to like lay it out like it's perfectly planned. And it's not always like that.
Right.
It's not how it works. Or if you say, should I get married? Well, you're asking someone else now to make a decision for you. And so it's better to make sure you leave things a little bit broader, because we always want to look at where's the potential of where this is going, and is there a better way? Is there something that's for your highest good? Is there something you're not seeing here? I mean, if you're just asking a yes or no, black and white, I mean, of course, with it, yes, you're going to get married. Yes, you should get married. But it's much better to understand, why do I want to get married? What is it about this partnership that is so important to me? And
Right.
what can we do to strengthen this relationship, not just so we're getting married, but so it's healthy? I just think we want to approach things from a much more introspective, empowered viewpoint. And you don't do that when it's just yes, no.
Sure, sure. And I mean, I think that kind of shows the true power of the cards is exploring kind of the greater scenario involved in the decision rather than just the yes or the no.
Yeah, well, think about how many people are like this. They think like life just happens to them.
Right.
And it's just a series of things happening to them. But actually, life is a series of your choices or your reactions. How are you reacting to a situation? That's where the magic is. When you start thinking very critically about the choices you've made, the choices you're about to make, and how you're reacting to events or situations, when you're present, you are creating magic for your future. It doesn't mean your life's going to be perfect. It's never going to be perfect. But if you are showing up with awareness, you are steering things in a direction for a much healthier or more wholesome life, a life where you are really creating meaning for yourself instead of just being asleep at the wheel and thinking it just somehow. I just woke up from a dream like Patrick Duffy on what is that? Was it Dynasty or Dallas? Where
Yeah.
you just woke
Yeah.
up, everything was a dream.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
No, it's not a dream. It's it's all based on your dream is based on what you're creating right now. So we got to approach it very differently. I just approach it very differently.
Well, that's a great. I think that's a great note to go out on. I think that's great advice, and we're at the end of an hour, so time to wrap things up. Theresa, it's been wonderful having you on the show again. I really enjoy chatting with you. Feels very much less like an interview and very much more like just talking with somebody who knows who's on the top of their game. So I very much appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It was my pleasure, Mike.
All right. This is Theresa Reed, also known as the Tarot Lady. Where can they find you online, the Tarot Lady website?
They can find me at thetarotlady.com. That's where all my stuff is.
Got it. Perfect. Theresa, once again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Weiser Books Radio Hour. Find us online at www.weiserbooks.com or wherever you get podcasts.